sure thing. There you go. These that one's on. If you turn that one on, then they're both live, so you can start talking whenever. And it will be okay just to turn this off while she's talking. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to take a picture of you and send it to you. Sure. Okay. Hi. Oh, hi. Nice to see you.
Remember me?
I do. I do.
What's supposed to see all grown up and
Oh,
I'm getting
a picture right now.
No. Where do you want me to stand, Heidi? Maybe just right next to your slide. Okay.
Test, test. Also for questions, just make sure you repeat the question to the mic so it picks up for our recording.
Okay.
Oh yeah, it was on, I think.
Oh, there you go. Check.
Okay, everybody, it's 2 p.m. So we're going to get started with the next breakout session for Indigenous Artwork, a tool for healing and identity. My name is Michael Marola. Welcome, everybody. I'm the database administrator at the College Fund, and I'm very pleased to introduce the presenter for this session, Bobbi Frederick. Bobbi is in the final year of her doctoral degree in educational leadership and innovation at Arizona State University. Bobbi served as a full-time art instructor at Turtle Mountain College for approximately 5 years and now serves as an adjunct faculty member in the Indigenous art field. Her research regarding artwork emphasizes its value in educational settings, which we will learn more about in this presentation. Today she's going to talk to us about Indigenous artwork as a tool for healing and identity development, and about halfway through we'll have an activity for everyone to get a little bit hands-on with it. All right, take it away, Bobbi.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. How are you? Feeling okay? Ready for the last section of the day? Okay, well, thank you for coming. Again, my name is Bobbi Lynn Frederick. I'm adjunct faculty at Turtle Mountain College. And yeah, I'll just be talking about some of my doctoral research. So bear with me, I got 2 laptops here. One has my speaker notes, and the other one is this one that you see right here. Okay. So just a little overview. I just kind of want to, so you guys know what you're getting into here. I'm going to be talking a little bit about what inspired me to pursue this work. We'll go over my research questions, and then some themes, theoretical foundation, methodology, intervention, and then just a couple things that I would like to acknowledge about my research, and then just some overall things I would like to share, and then we'll go into questions and then the workshop. So what really inspired me was when I first started, well, first let me talk about my personal journey with artwork. Started when I was a child and kind of into my teen years, mostly with beading and sewing, and then I kind of started to dabble into other things. So when I first started working at TMCC, or it was TMCC, now it's TMC, my students really inspired me. I did pre and post surveys, which is where I learned that the students were also looking for something similar as to what I was looking for myself when I started my artwork journey, which was a connection to their own tribal identity. And what I also found in the post surveys was they found a way to just kind of cope with daily life and daily stressors. And one of the terms that came up in the post surveys was they get to zone out, like just get into like a creative mode, because I would turn music on and then they would just be able to bead or sew or whatever we were doing in my art classes. And let's see, okay. So my research questions are: how does Indigenous artwork emphasize and value the importance of healing? Same question on identity development. And then I just added a third question, was how might these understandings be developed into a practical tool to support educators in designing opportunities for Indigenous learning. So. And oh no, I got signed out. Okay, here we go. Sorry. Okay, so although I've always understood the connection between land, culture, knowledge, and spirituality with artwork, but when I started doing my research, these 4 elements were continuously speaking to me. And so from there, we know that our identity is linked to space and place, and with the land that we live on is the same land that our ancestors lived on. And if you apply this to artwork, there's many designs that are connected to that, like florals. There's designs that represent insects. There's designs that are connected to plants, and so there's medicines in those plants. And then there's also designs that connect to our creation stories. With culture, we have a lot of cultural customs with artwork, and we use them in a purposeful way, such as like with giveaways, like producing star blankets and then they're given away. And there's also other things that we use too. So for example, there's this book called A Bag Worth a Pony, which basically talks about the Anishinaabe bandolier bags that date back to the 1800s. And they served a functional purpose, but they also served as a medicinal purpose. They carried medicines in them. And so today, those bags are still used as, they can be functional, but they're really seen a lot in our powwows. The men carry them, and the women too. But you see a lot of the men who are the woodlands style dancers, and they have a lot of Anishinaabe florals and woodland style beadwork, and you see them all wearing bandolier bags. So that's just one way of keeping the culture alive with the artwork. And then with these pieces that comes knowledge. There's oral stories that are passed down, and then again, going back to the creation stories, we have winter counts, and those winter counts carry knowledge. They're also a form of record keeping. And then with the spirituality aspect, we have, there's aspects such as star knowledge that's embedded into some of the beadwork or the quill work or designs from different tribes that have spiritual knowledge connected to it. And so an example that I can share is from, I asked a presenter to come to my class, and he talked about the cradle boards. So the Ojibwe cradle boards from his reserve in Canada, they incorporated different species from each, or different animals from each species, like different creatures such as insects, four-legged animals, winged animals, and then there was plants that were embedded into the cradle board. And each of those aspects had knowledge embedded to it, and knowledge that was attached to it. And so that the baby would absorb these things so that they would have that knowledge and take on some of those characteristics as they grow. And so that was the purpose of those things in the Ojibwe cradle boards from his community. And then so from there, my theoretical foundation is tribal critical race theory, which has 9 tenets. And those tenets talk about education from an Indigenous lens. And tenet 5 is the one that I chose for artwork, which says the concepts of culture, knowledge, and power take on a new meaning when examined through an Indigenous lens. And so we have tribal crit, and we have what was talked about in the previous statement, culture, knowledge, and power. So culture, with culture, there's art knowledge through cultural production, and it's linked to cultural stability and fluidity, because it's how Brayboy states it is it's fixed and stable through ancestral ties with land, culture, knowledge, and spirituality. He doesn't specifically state those 4 aspects, but that's what I've noticed about artwork and tribal crit, that they're very much linked together. And so artwork serves as a form of cultural stability through those 4 aspects, but also highlighting the connection between land, culture, knowledge, and spirituality. And then so the artwork that I pursue comes from a cultural adaptation, which is also what is described as both fluid and fixed. And utilizing the traditional methods and materials, including hide, porcupine quills, natural dyes from the earth, and other available resources, is something that our ancestors did to create things such as moccasins, vests, cradle boards, and they served as, clothing. It served as a function, and then it was an assured survival, and then it also conveyed status. And then so the fluidity part of the culture with artwork is applied when new supplies came available through trade, like beads and ribbons and calico fabrics. And so when you talk about the fixed part of culture with artwork, using those beads and ribbons and fabrics to keep the art culture and the art production going, but just adapting to these new supplies, but keeping the designs and the patterns the same. And so the other spin on that is today, a lot of those traditional methods are still being used, like tanning hides, using natural dyes from the earth. So those things were kept alive, but there's also so much change. And so this is what Brayboy talks about in education, but I could see this applying to artwork as well. And so with knowledge, there are 3 forms of knowledge. So there's cultural knowledge, knowledge of survival, and power. Sorry, not power, academic knowledge. So knowledge is linked to culture, and it's linked to power through the artwork. So academic knowledge in this study, with Tenet 5, it puts one in a position of power. So let me explain that really quick. So with power, culture, and knowledge are in a dialogic relationship with each other. And then it puts you in a position of responsibility. So that's what power means in tribal crit. It's not an authoritative type of power. It's a power of, you have all of this knowledge and you can apply this knowledge to artwork through your community, and therefore you have the responsibility to share these knowledges with your community, with your tribal college, with your students, with your family, because what we believe is knowledge is shared, and you don't own knowledge. Knowledge is you give knowledge away so that it ensures survival of your people. And so this, for me, this applies to artwork. And then how tribal crit explains it is adapting and adjusting and changing of circumstances of everyday life, landscapes, ideas, time, situations, education. Indigenous art becomes one of the most visible expressions of power, and it reflects and preserves cultural knowledge. It asserts self-definition. It's also a resistance to colonial erasure. And so these concepts of power and sovereignty are foundational to understanding how creative practices function as a form of resilience and building community strength. And then so tribal crit reinforces the understanding that power through the Indigenous lens it's like an energetic force that circulates through the universe, is how it's described in tribal crit in Tenet 5. It's both internal and external dialogic relationship. And then this is applied to the individual and to the tribe. And then it becomes a responsibility to ensure that we understand and utilize this power in this way. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so for my methodology, I did some preliminary interviews, some questions were asked, and then I did coding, and then these 3 themes emerged through the interview. And so coding, coping, culture, and identity. So moving forward with that, I will be getting participants from various tribes. I did not put my research to just one community or to one tribe. It's kind of it can apply to anything, and it can apply to any institution, K-12 or higher education, TCUs. And then I will be getting 8 to 12 artists, hopefully, and we'll be doing Zoom interviews. And then, of course, I'll do an informal invitation just to collect email addresses so that I can do the formal invitation. And then I'm not going to get too much into those details to protect identities. And so my potential for tool development is tailored to connect to identity and healing aspects of artwork. It will encompass culture, knowledge, and power of Tenet 5 from Tribal Crit. And then, of course, it will also tie to land, culture, knowledge, and spirituality from Indigenous artwork. And this potential tool can be informative, and it can be something empowering to influence the value of artwork and how it can be incorporated into academic settings. And then just some things that I wanted to acknowledge. Tribal Crit hasn't said or related anything to healing. So that's just something that I've noticed when I was doing the research. And then although we talk about languages, how important, we know how important and how vital languages, our Indigenous languages, are to our identity. They're the foundation of it. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that in my research, and this, I've always known this, but when I started my research, you know, I always thought about like the language aspect about artwork. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that language is not covered in my research. But I do understand the vitality of it. And then I talked a little bit about resilience, but resilience is not covered in this study because I haven't gotten that far yet. And then the last thing is, because it's not developed yet, it does need more research. And so this tool, this potential tool that I have not developed yet, it may not be received by, or it may not apply to every tribe, TCU, or any institution. So those are just some things that I wanted to personally acknowledge. So overall, my hope is that this potential tool, or even just the research itself, is something that can be helpful to communities, to tribes, to individuals, because it goes back to tribal identity, and it's finding that connection with our ancestors through our art forms. And then it comes down to, you know, that part of it is linked to the identity aspect. And then with that comes coping and finding a way to address issues that connect to resiliency. And we know that our Indigenous people are very strong because of the resiliency. And so finding the connection to land, culture, knowledge, and spirituality through artwork, I think it does that. But that's just me. That's just my experience. And so there's my references, my acknowledgements, and any questions? We had a question back there.
I just had a quick question. You may have addressed it when you were talking earlier. I apologize for being late. But what year are you in your study, and where are you? What is your where are you studying at? And what is your draft, or what is your proposal like? Timeline as far as finishing?
I am in my final year of my doctoral program, and I am defending my proposal on June 30th. And then, yeah, thank you. And I'm with Arizona State University online in educational leadership.
That's great. Me too. I'm in my second year. And
Oh.
right now I'm working on my proposal and my RB hopefully by the end of this spring quarter. And then I'll start my research in September. And so when you're talking about your
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. When we're talking about your research and the artists, are you, because my goal is to work with Native youth leadership with the connection to culture, because I'm a master weaver in Washington
Yes, I'm looking. I have a list. So I have 15 people on my list, but I'm only looking for 8 to 12. But we know how sometimes it's hard to get people who are, everybody's so busy. But yes, all of my artists will be from various tribes throughout the United States, and they'll be from various types of art backgrounds. Thank you. Yes.
I'm hearing you, and I'm trying to process everything, and you're talking about critical race theory, etc., and through your artwork. Do you support the fight against racism in your artwork, or is that not the movement you're having, or is your movement something else?
I think it's more about just addressing the issue of connecting to identity specifically for Indigenous students or Indigenous people, and then finding a coping mechanism.
How does that, what's parallel to critical race theory, your subject of that?
Well, just kind of how tribal critical race theory, it's not necessarily, I don't think it's necessarily about race. I think it's just more about addressing the issues in education that Indigenous people face, because our situations are so unique because we're from sovereign nations, because we have a unique political relationship with the federal government through treaties, and we're the only group of people in the United States who have this. And so I think that's what tribal critical race theory is trying to address in education. And so for me, although tribal critical race theory is specific towards education, I only chose one part of it to support my research, which was Tenet 5, which talks about culture, knowledge, and power in that dialogic relationship. And so that's the part of tribal crit that I'm focusing on, if that makes sense. I hope that answers your question.
It does.
Okay, thank you. That was a good question. Anybody else? Got one more back there.
I know you haven't developed your tool yet, but I'm assuming that you have some ideal something in mind that you're hoping this will lead to. Is this something that's online? Is it a lesson? Is it a
I haven't figured it out yet.
Is it
I haven't figured it out yet. I have ideas in my mind, but I need to discuss it with my committee first, and then we'll go from there. But thank you for that.
Ideally, what would it be? If they would accept anything you wanted, kind of what's in your head now?
I'm not really ready to share about that yet. So, but thank you. Appreciate it. What was your question?
I was just thinking about, so you're not specifically talking about language, but I mean, since you are talking about symbolic action, I don't know if that's something that you could incorporate, because, okay, maybe it's not spoken language, but, not everybody could decode, let's say, that piece of artwork.
Right.
So you're dealing with your own, you're dealing with a, I guess, a very different semiotic system. So I don't know if that's something that you could.
Yes, absolutely. I appreciate that. So your question is more about, like, because language is not covered in the research, there is decoding of the designs and the symbols and stuff that are, yeah, I get that. And this is going to go back into something that I'm going to talk about with my committee and how we can address that. So, but thank you. That's a good question too.
Running for council real quick. All right, so like what I got off of that is based off of your artwork identifying identity. Like, I'll give you a little short story about one of these processes playing out along those lines. We we had the chief of the Pekani Nation just north of us called down. He's my cousin, and he was asking about our family lodge. And I told him, geez, because I don't know. I said, I just remember the top. And then he called and he contacted my brother. And he told him, well, I don't know, cousin. All I remember is the bottom. And then he called my mom, and she said, well, she said, I remember the center and somewhat of the bottom, but I don't remember the top. So my cousin reached over to us, who we really don't really associate with very much. We know his political stature and everything up there, but we just know him as our cousin. And so when he came down and he started questioning about this lodge, my grandpa, Tom, he was one that gave that information to me. He was also the one that gave that information to my brother. And he was also the one to give that information to my mother. Now that was all the way back, I'd say maybe about 82, 83 that this all had happened, knowing that he was at the end of his life. And what we found out from them stories is we knew exactly where our family's lodge was the whole time. All we had to do was talk to each other. Now the person that was taking care of it, his dad, had passed away also, so he had our family lodge and he didn't know what it meant. What's the story behind this? What's the story behind this? And what's the story behind this? So each one of them stories talks about our lineage and where we come from, what description of land that we come from, the very same stories that my kids are named after. Little Creek and Chutes on both sides. So we have relatives on the north side and this side. My cousin learned a lot about us when he had to come over here. It was a connection of identity through our artwork of our lodge. Now, it's not artwork, okay? I'll put that right out there. It's not artwork. It was a dream. And who gave us that dream was my grandpa's great-grandpa. That's how long that old man has been with our family. And it's just like how we used to carry fire, the Blackfeet. It wasn't about starting a fire. It was about the continuance of that fire from generation to generation to generation. The initial fire was here, but we still have it today because of it. And what you're seeing in your artwork here, I hope that you do well in it, because it does tell stories. It tells us our language acquisition, our stories of our people. It describes a place of where we are, and it also pulls together generations across, and it just amazes me. It really does. But artwork, that's why I'm sitting right here right now, is because artwork does tell a story. It's up to you to interpret it. It's up to you to find out what it is. And I just think that your research here, although young, is going to be very successful.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you for the story.
I'm really interested in what you're doing. Reason being is because I've been doing it since I was a kid as well. I got my master's in 1999 out of the University of North Dakota. I started initially going into painting, so I got approved in my master's degree to go into painting. But at that particular time, I had been kind of goofing around. I've been telling my professor, I want to do something else. I want this computer stuff. So we started graphics, and I am the first, I was telling this gentleman, I'm the guinea pig out of our university to do graphic design. We never had it. Now they have a full program, and I ended up teaching these classes. But the question, and I guess I don't even know if it's really a question, but the thing that I've been thinking about for years since then was when I was a little kid, we all danced and sang, so we always were around this stuff, beadwork, applique, and whatnot. But what I found out was that it really, I thought maybe at one point in time, because I was looking at my doctorates, I would look at the way that it was presented as an art form, if you will. Reason being is because when I went into this new graphics area, graduated with my master's, went back to the reservation, started teaching and showing it, it was taboo, if you will. It was so far in advance back in '99 that they didn't want to touch it. Get back to the painting, Mr. Fox. Do the old style. Do the ledger art. So I'm like, yeah, okay. You know, that's the bread and butter work, but the futuristic stuff wasn't really happening. Now, lo and behold, you blink your eyes, and every one of you probably could take your phones out right now and design something in seconds, in minutes, which it took us hours and hours and hours to do back in the 1900s. But that's one of the things that just baffled me, and to this day it still does, is what was traditional and what was not traditional, in a way that you're presenting it. So off the reservation, it was great. They loved it. So when I went back, they didn't. They wanted the old style. So I was kind of, again, conflicted with two different worlds, the new digital world against the traditional world. Do you have any areas in there that you're going to be working with on that?
The struggle with the artwork, I actually talk about that in my chapter 1 of my dissertation. I talk about with my personal journey. I struggled with that too. I had, so I'm from Crow Creek. I'm Hunkpati, Dakota, but I was raised on Turtle Mountain Reservation. I was adopted when my parents, my parents, the ones who raised me, my mom, she's Hopi, so I was raised with a lot of Hopi influence. My dad, he was Turtle Mountain, so I was raised with a lot of Turtle Mountain influence. And my parents tried really hard to guide me towards my Dakota culture, my Dakota teachings. And so there was a lot of identity struggle for me growing up, because I didn't know who to connect with. I was an outsider at Hopi and Turtle Mountain. I had an incident that actually happened with artwork, where I created some floral designs because I wanted to represent my dad's tribe. So I was using Anishinaabe florals to connect that and to represent for my dad. And then I had somebody say something to me about those, this is not you, so you shouldn't be using these. So that really pushed me towards my Dakota designs, and you see a lot of Dakota florals in my work. And that's kind of where I started my identity development journey with artwork, because I danced powwow my whole life, and I had to learn how to sew and bead for myself. And then when you're out there on the dance floor, you want to look good, you want to represent yourself and your family well. I didn't know who to represent, so I struggled with that, and that's what really pushed me into this. And I still struggle with it. I'm still very, very cautious and careful about, using designs, and I don't use any outside designs. I barely work with Hopi designs. I'm starting to get back into Ojibwe designs because people are more accepting of me as a Turtle Mountain, not a member, but as a community member. And so when I went back to my Crow Creek community, I was terrified, but thankfully they welcomed me and they wanted me to be connected to them. And so I felt good about it. I felt good about pursuing my Dakota side. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think a lot of us stayed away from artwork for so long because it's a touchy subject when it comes to identity and then the designs, and it's scary. So I want to thank you for that. I hope I answered your question. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for the questions. Sorry, we're
sorry.
running out of time, so we're going to move on to the art activity next. We have about 10 minutes left. If you still have questions for Bobbi, please find her afterwards or at her roundtable session tomorrow.
Okay.
We're going to pass out the activity.
Yeah, so this activity is just for you. It's just supposed to be fun and engaging. It's a chance for you to dabble in your own little artwork project. We'll be doing some ledger drawings, so you'll each get 2 sheets of paper. The first one is just for practice. You can make mistakes on it and whatever you want, and then the second one, you can perfect it. You can take it home with you and do whatever you want with it. And you can create whatever you want, whatever's on your heart today, whatever's on your mind. If you want to draw something with your family or your kids, grandkids, if you want to draw something that connects to your culture, maybe, whatever you want to draw, a sun, go ahead, draw a building, whatever you want to do. Just, you have the freedom of creativity today, and this is just for your own personal collection. I just want it to be fun. So you'll all get some colored pencils too. Other than that, thank you. So you probably noticed that the paper that you're getting has, it's ledger paper. And I don't know if you're familiar with ledger art, but ledger art started with some warriors that were taken to Florida from Oklahoma area back in the day. And they had, they were prisoners of war. And so they were given pieces of ledger paper to draw on. And so these prisoners of war created stories on these pieces of ledger. And they had, they were just depicting like their battles that they fought. Some of them depicted their families at home that they missed. And that's kind of how ledger art started. And then it just spread, and then it just blew up. And so now there's like a whole world of ledger artwork. And so that's kind of the inspiration of why I chose to do ledger artwork today for this little workshop. So hope that helps why I chose to use this paper. Then how much time do they have?
How about 5 minutes?
That's it? Oh my gosh, I thought they had more time. you guys could take it home and do your thing.
Okay, everybody. We're about out of time. Feel free to continue wrapping up your beautiful artwork. Just as a reminder, buses are running at 3:05, so please be ready. The numbers for your bus are on the back of your name tags, so please be ready in the lobby at 3:05 in order to be ensured that we have everyone covered for transportation to the Red Lake College. As well as please stay on that bus for the return, and they will stop at the Cambria Hotel on the return trip also. If you have any questions about that, please come up to me and ask as well. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Bobbi, for the presentation.